quite a few of our hay meadows they don't bother with now, but if you could grow hay grass on some of them, you did. And, well, you did put a bit of basic slag to help the meadows, and it never seemed to do any hurt. But of course we didn't have all the stuff that they have today, which, you know, does away with the old type hay grass. And you used to manure them with the cattle manure and all that, and that's how you improved your meadow. When I say improved, you just kept it healthy. But we didn't seem to do away with the old type grasses. The grasses were the same as in the ancient days.
They were herb-rich, to say the least. But you see, there wasn't enough manure to over-manure them, and the only artificials, as you might say, we put on were lime, and also we would put basic slag, which in effect was phosphate, on the meadows and sometimes on pastures, but just from time to time, and that increased the clover, which of course meant that more nitrogen was actually produced, and that was how it was done.
There was more variety in the fields them days when you were born with horses. There was quite a lot of things. There was crane, we call them cranes fields, another name, because I know when I was at Penrith School, often it was needed for O level, was this flower. I was the only one I didn't tell anybody, but our teacher knew where I lived, and so the morning of the O level exam I used to have to go and collect a lot of these flowers up and take them in for O level exam.
Well, I can remember the grasses in the hay fields, because not only did I see them growing, but when they'd collected the hay up, you could see all these dry specimens of various flowers. There would be harebells, there was yellow rattle, there were all different types of grasses, and there was a flower like bird's foot trefoil. And bird's foot trefoil, it was a little yellowy flower that grew quite low down, and all those wild flowers, when they'd been made into hay, was very useful for food, for fodder in the winter.
The hayfields were totally different, because the hayfields were like bunches of mixed flowers. The hay was full of flowers. It was just the ones when all the seed was still in the ears of the grass. And as you went down the fields towards the becks at the bottom, the flora and fauna obviously changed. You got more burnets at the bottom, more meadowsweet, more of the tall flowers that thrive on the wetter, boggier bits. But it was all cut, it all went into hay. And in the winter, when you put it in the byres for the cows to eat, you'd see all these dried flowers. It was lovely. And the hay, when it was made, was beautiful. It was pale green, pale linen green colour. That was good hay. And you used to dig a hole into the middle of the haystack and pull it out and sniff it, see if it smelled right. And when it smells right, it smells almost like tea.
Oh, there were dog daisies, lots of dog daisies, and yellow rattle and sweet vernal grass, which gave it its nice smell. Great burnet, which is the red thing we used to make wine out of, the burnet's heads. Sorrels, all kinds of things grew in it. Real mixture of buttercups, and it just depends. Different meadows sort of tended to be different, but they all had the same sort of basic flora.
I'll tell you one grass I don't see, which we used to get, and that's quaking grass. The little nodding quaking grasses. And I can remember then the grass tilting and falling over the side, and I can remember quaking grass in those first cuts, so it was round the edge of hayfields.
But the old type meadows, they always were colourful, you know. Early in the year there was buttercups and all that, and then they disappeared because the hay grass grew a bit over them. And then the other ones, I called it yellow rattle because you could do it as a child, you see, you used to play about with it. A yellow rattle, you could pick it up and make it rattle. You know, it was like a child's rattle except on a mini scale, you know. And I was laughing about it many a time.
All the folks who lived at where I lived were all fond of flowers. All of them. All of them. Flowers and birds, it was part of their life in a way. Well, my father used to sort of, when he would go and look to see if the hay was ready, the grass was ready for cutting, he'd say, oh, well, I can see so-and-so and such a flower, they're all growing big, it's getting ready to be cut. So, you know, that's how it was.
I remember this valley in Thralkeld and the fields in the bottom of the valley being covered in flowers, particularly burnip and things like that, dog daisies, rattle, yellow rattle, and things like this. And the reason that the flowers disappeared was that farmers were encouraged to get more hay, to have more crops of hay, more intensive farming. So what they would do, they would get shot of they would probably plough a field, they would put ryegrass in, they would get 3 crops of hay instead of 1. Therefore the flowers, they were cutting it earlier, never had time to seed, because farmers got paid for that.
Obviously, you see them cutting silage now. Well, there's hardly a flaunting flower amongst it. And whereas when they used to cut hay, I mean, so all the flowers were coming out, and the seeds reached the seeding stage, and a lot of the seeds used to sweep up with the hay. Sweep up, gather hay seed. If you sowed a lawn with hay seeds, you got a collection of all sorts of weeds in creation, because it wasn't just the hay seeds, there was everything else in it.
The meadows where they grew the hay were in the lowest part of the valley. Then those meadows were the life of the farm, really, to provide the winter food. There used to be quite a lot of rich meadow flowers. In fact, I think they welcomed so-called weeds, white clover, red clover, if they could get that in the grass. It was very nutritious. Now the farmers are likely to be using herbicides so that they would just get pure grass rather than mixed herb grasses. It would be in the 50s and 60s when they began to use, as one farmer called it, bagged stuff, artificial fertilizers he was putting on. To the farmers, this was making their life easier in many ways, because you would get nutritious grass several weeks sooner, I would think, than by putting on ordinary farmyard manure.
People have gone into this different way of everybody putting on artificial fertiliser. There are patches in fields where you can't put artificial fertiliser. If you look across the dale onto the side of Hartefell, there are sloping meadows there which you cannot mow, and you can't put on fertiliser or anything. And you even had things like globe flowers growing, you see. There were some nice mountain violets and things. I think they didn't bother much with that bit. It was rather steep and high. And so they left it to nature. But in general, they have just gone. And for quite a time,
Their meadows were full of little herbs and burnets and all kinds of different little herbs and spices of the upland meadows. But they didn't yield very well. And most of these farms ran out of fodder before the spring came. If it was a late spring, people were getting really desperate about how to feed the stock before they could turn them out. And this was what the war did. It altered things. It made people plough up some of these old meadows and sow different grasses when the time came after they'd cropped them. And they saw that they could produce more by putting new seeds into these old meadows. And this is what changed. That was the start of the change in upland farming to me.